morning. Okay, so I have my cheat sheet. I'm just trying to figure out how to, I guess I'm just going to put it right on top. If I hit a key by accident that I'm not supposed to, you'll know. Well, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak with you today, and particularly want to recognize Jeff Ray and Walt Buchanan. I don't know where Walt is. I saw him. There he is. Both of whom actually, Jeff didn't say this, but they're actually serving on the committee that is overseeing this project at the Academy of Engineering. Ken Burbank, Ron Land, Mike O'Hare, Bob Herrick, I'm probably forgetting somebody. But very patiently over several years, as Jeff said, they talked to me at different venues about engineering technology and why it's important, and convinced me that it is a neglected part of our educational system in terms of the technical workforce. And so it really was their encouragement that led the NAE to propose to NSF that we do this look at engineering technology. So I, again, want to formally thank that group for their persistence and good humor about it. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the academies where I come from, just because I find most people don't know a lot about us, which is fine, but I think it's good to share a little bit of information. I'll talk about the rationale for this study that we're doing and some of the specifics of what the study is involved with, the statement of task. Talk about what Jeff and Walt and the rest of the committee are tasked with doing, and what we have done and will do through the course of the project. And then, to me, the more interesting part of this, and I hope for you as well, will be some reflections, mostly, I mean, they are personal, but they're tied to our project around what I'm calling emerging issues that are relevant to engineering technology. And just as, so that you know, I am not of your community. In fact, I'm not an engineer either. I don't know if that qualifies me or disqualifies me from everything I'm about to say, but I didn't want to deceive you about my own background. I have a background in the sciences, in biology, and in journalism, in fact. So the National Academies are a nonprofit organization. First thing we always say is we are not part of the federal government. And that's frequently we're mistaken for the National Science Foundation, for example. But we are a nonprofit 501c3 that was established by law back around the time of the Civil War, and the fact that Lincoln signed a law putting us in business is what we often say, and it sounds very impressive. But the truth is, at the time, in the District of Columbia, to be incorporated, there was no local government, so you had to be incorporated by an act of Congress. So it's not quite as impressive as it sounds. However, we did, in that act of incorporation, get charged with a particular kind of mission that is unique. And that was to provide advice to the federal government whenever called upon without charge on matters of science and the technical arts, I believe is what was in the enabling legislation at the time. So we are sort of two parts. We are an honorary membership organization, so people are elected by their peers to be a member. You can't just join. There are about 2,200 members of the National Academy of Engineering, similar number at the National Academy of Sciences, and then the Institute of Medicine, which represents sort of the health side of the house, has about 1,800 members. There's also something called the NRC, you see there, the National Research Council, which is basically the staff that supports this operation. So we're an honorary membership organization. It's considered a high honor to be elected a member. But the other part of what we do is we do this advisory function. And that's what my role is, in essence, and my colleagues. We have a staff of around 1,000 people based here in Washington, with meeting facilities in DC, in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and in Irvine, California, where we convene groups that are involved in, at any one time, around 500 studies involving about 8,000 to 10,000 experts who are volunteering their time to help us. So the staff, like me, we may have expertise, but we aren't driving these projects typically. We have a committee like the one that Jeff and Walt is on. So that gives you a sense of, I hope, a little bit more about the academies. And we are a soft money organization, which means we raise money. We don't get an appropriation from Congress. We do get a lot of funding from the federal agencies to do this work, but it's all for particular projects. It's about a $350 million a year operation. We also publish a lot of reports. That's a typical course of a project is to produce a report of some kind, although not every project has a report. But I thought I would share with you just a few examples of titles of engineering-related reports that have come out in the past 10 years, 10 to 15 years. And I won't read these, but they do span everything from pre-college, so K through 12, up through secondary and even post-secondary, and then workforce and competitiveness issues and so on. Engineering, we like to think, is kind of the center of everything. Of course, the science folks think science is the center, but that's a discussion for another day. So the rationale for this project, which developed through these conversations with, between me and some of your colleagues, really is what's here. I mean, essentially there is, and has been for many years, a strong interest by policymakers and others in the U.S. technical workforce. However, the discussion for the most part on this topic is focused on science, scientists, and technical talent, typically engineers. And relatively little attention has been given either to the 4-year or the 2-year graduates of engineering technology. And I wanted to also mention that our project is looking at the 2-year degree track or pathway. But today I'm only really talking about the 4-year programs and track, just because that's my understanding is really that's your interest and that's where you come from. But we are in our study paying considerable attention to the 2-year track as well. So this is just this is a figure from a commission paper that we produced for our project, and if I had a pointer, I guess you can see it pretty clearly, but that top line represents the associate degrees over time from about 1989 to 2012. The dashed lines are the bachelor's degrees. This is all related to engineering technology. And then the certificates is what starts as the dark line at the bottom and then climbs rapidly beginning around the mid-2000s. This is the sort of the pattern over the last 30 years or so, which most of you are probably familiar with. The other sort of number thing that I wanted to share with you is just some actual counts of degree holders and employment. The acronyms at the top are just calling out particular federal data sets that we've looked at. And the thing I wanted to point out to you is in the first row, there are roughly 450,000 or so 4-year degree holders in engineering technology, and 2 rows down you see the 4.6 and 3.4 million. These numbers disagree for different reasons, but the main point is that second line, the third row, is engineering degrees. So there's about a 10-fold difference in degree holders. Again, I'm sure that's not a surprise to you. If you look down at the bottom in terms of employment, if you look at essentially the last 3 columns make the point that the majority in this count of, if you take engineering technicians, the 2-year type for our purposes, and the 4-year engineering technologists, again, I know we don't, the language is possibly problematic, but the 2-year degree holders represent about 80% of the total. The federal government counts these often in together, and then this table separates them out. So the proposal, which we sent to NSF, asked a number of questions, and I wanted to just show you several of them that suggest the course of our project. One is concerned with supply and demand, essentially. Another is concerned with the curriculum and how well or poorly the curriculum is meeting the needs of employers and the competitive nature of modern life. And the last is to suggest some need to look at the differences and similarities between engineering technology and engineering. So when we do these projects, we develop a formal statement of task for the committee, and I thought I would share that with you since that's what's driving this project. There are three statements in this task or objectives. First is to sort of look at the current status and the history. And we've commissioned a paper that has looked at these federal data sets, and we are going to be providing as much an accurate account of the history of the field as we can based on other published work. We are also conducting a couple of large surveys. Some of you will very soon be receiving a note asking you to participate in the survey. We are doing a survey of a subset of employers in the United States, and we're trying to also survey all of the 4- and 2-year engineering technology programs in the United States. I'm sure we won't reach all of them, but we've got a pretty comprehensive list. And we have a number of questions that we're asking employers and educators about their awareness, in the case of employers, about engineering technology. And when they are aware, we ask them lots of questions about what these people do, how they compare to engineering, what the employer wish they could do that they don't, and so on. And we plan to share all that information once we get the results. So we also hope to dig in a bit to the details of what the coursework really is in engineering technology and how well or in what ways engineering technology is sort of connected to other parts of the education system. So those are the three statements of task, and this is the committee. It's a 14-member group. It's chaired by 2 members of the National Academy of Engineering, Catherine Fraze from IBM, and Ron Latannison, who is a consultant with an engineering consulting company called Exponent. And we do have representatives on this committee, not only from the 2-year side of engineering technology, but also we have 2 K-12 teachers. And we have several people from industry, as well as from the CTE and ATE programs, which I am assuming you're at least somewhat familiar with. So the committee is, as I said earlier, typically for our projects, the committee is in charge of overseeing the work. Staff help, of course, comes into play, but the committee ultimately is driving this, and they plan the activities that we have, and their charge is to produce a report. In this case, the report will have their findings and recommendations. That report, before it can be published, has to go through a very intense peer review, and the committee and staff are involved in that. And then, of course, we're doing now, and this is part of it, my coming here, and once the report is published, we do a lot of outreach to try to share what we found and have discussions about it with various communities. So in terms of what we've actually done, we've had 3 meetings already of the committee. We'll have our last meeting in December, and that'll be combined with a workshop, which I'll mention in a second. We've done some literature reviews. We've looked at existing federal data sets. We've commissioned some papers, I've mentioned that. We've planned some surveys. Actually, one of them has already been fielded. And we plan a workshop also in December. There's obviously the report has to be written and published. So the workshop, which we hope that some of you may attend here in DC, is on December 2nd. And that's our opportunity to begin to tell people what the committee has found, and also to inform particularly some policymaking in the policymaking community here in Washington about some of the issues and importance of engineering technology. So we look forward to that event and hope that, as I said, that some of you at least might be able to attend. So now I'm going to move to the what I've called emerging issues. They're not really probably emerging. That's just maybe in my own mind, emerging. But I'm going to talk about what I am terming the value proposition for engineering technology, the issue of distinguishing or determining the differences and similarities between engineering technology and engineering, the issue of diversity, and by that, in this case, I mean gender and ethnicity, and then the importance of image and branding. This is an excerpt from a dissertation prospectus by a gentleman named Ron Dempsey. And he's done a very thorough historical look at engineering technology as part of his prospectus. And I wanted to, this is probably, I'm sure, not news to you, but I'd like you to just, as I'm talking, if you can, just read that. But essentially, one important value proposition that I've heard repeatedly, and I'm sure, I hope anyway, is common among your community, is this orientation to application. And there's a historical reason for this, which is why I put this little snippet up there. And it has to do with the history of engineering and the upset caused by Sputnik and other things that were happening in technical education around in the 30s and 40s. But in any case, this is certainly, I think, a valid, from everything that I've heard, a valid and important aspect of what I'm calling the value proposition. This is another one, and I likewise would ask that you read that while I'm speaking. But to summarize this is the idea that in terms of function, some people, and historically there's some evidence for this belief, think that engineering technology, if you think of a continuum of from the tradesman through to the other extreme of an engineering degreed person who's doing high-level math and science in a design context, that somewhere in the middle or somewhere in there, in a supportive role, is engineering technology. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this or disagree with it, but it is an aspect of value. The way that it's phrased here, I would say the analogy may not be the best, but the idea of engineering technology being in a support role to engineering and engineers really does go back, as far as I know, to the origins of the field. But as many of you know, this kind of positioning is not necessarily universally accepted. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So another one of these emerging issues for the committee and for our project is how to distinguish engineering technology from engineering. Now, our project, in terms of the curriculum piece, we're going to try to analyze a number of curricula across a range of program types within engineering technology. And the effort here is going to be to try to distill the common features and to try to understand, if possible, what factors distinguish an ET curriculum from an engineering curriculum. I'm not sure that we're going to succeed in that effort, but we're going to make an effort. We're going to try. We do know, in terms of hiring and the work performed, we do know something about how employers view those with four-year engineering technology degrees from the survey that the ETC conducted in 2012. And as some of you know who've looked at those data, that survey found that employers were largely unaware of or indifferent to the degree type in terms of engineering technology versus engineering, but really focused instead on the function performed by the person in the workplace. Now, as I've mentioned before, our project is going to be doing a survey of employers, and we hope that we will extend and maybe deepen some of the findings from the ETC study. And as I said, we'll present results from that, at least preliminary results, in our December workshop. Another way you can try to think about and understand the differences between engineering technology and engineering is to ask those with the degree, how do they perceive themselves? By the way, it's pretty well understood from the social science research that the employee and the employer will agree only about 75% of the time on the job that the employee is doing. Another way to put this is, when you ask employers what their workers are doing, what their job function is, they aren't going to always agree with what the employer, him or herself, thinks. And here's just a demonstration of that. well, this is not a demonstration directly of that principle, but this gives you, this is from the National Survey of College Graduates, one of the data sets that we've looked at. And it is, these survey participants are asked to choose the job category that they believe they're working in. And these are all people with engineering technology degrees. And one thing that you will note in the column of percent across from engineering technologists is the very low percentage of engineering technology degree holders who identify themselves as engineering technologists. There are probably a number of reasons for that. The lack of currency of this term engineering technologists is probably a key factor. But you also notice that a fifth of these respondents identify themselves as engineers. And the largest category, apart from other, which we need to tease out, and I can't for you right now, but the other largest category is manager. These are obviously broad categories. But this just gives you a sense that it's not necessarily straightforward to figure out what an engineering technologist is doing, or what someone with an engineering technology degree is doing. Now I want to go to diversity, and again, I know this will come as no surprise to you, at least most of this won't, maybe none of it, but I did want to make the general point that engineering technology and engineering are very similar in, in a way that's not something that I'm sure you're happy about, which is that not doing so well in bringing in women or underrepresented minorities. However, there is one kind of interesting data point that I wanted to show you, and that's the 9.1% of degree holders who are African American. That's twice the number in engineering. It turns out that Ron Dempsey's dissertation project, although I showed you something that he had written about the history, his project is actually trying to look at this issue in part at least for African Americans, and how or whether engineering technology is a help or a hindrance to their pursuit of engineering. And this is one interesting data point that I thought if you didn't know about, you should. Also, there is a significant larger number of African Americans who are getting certificates in engineering technology. The other thing I would point out on the downside is that in terms of attracting women, engineering technology is pulling in 30% fewer women, only about 12% of the total degree holders. So now I'm going to turn to image, what I'm calling image. And this is from a paper from 2010. Some of you may be familiar with it. I'm going to read this one, actually. Engineering technology is not very well understood. To a substantial extent, this is true for those in academia and in industry. Hence, when engineering technology issues are discussed, the exchange of opinions may be dominated by oft-repeated stereotypical images. Such stereotypes, which, while true to some extent, are indeed only partially true. For example, the lesser emphasis on theory and mathematical rigor causes engineering technology to be viewed as inferior to engineering that is engineering light. This is perhaps the most damaging stereotype. To me, this is an interesting statement because it highlights the tension, and this is my opinion, between what I've called the value proposition and what Kelnhofer and his colleagues term a damaging stereotype. It may be actually that these two things are the same side, or opposite sides rather, of the same coin. Stereotype, on one hand, actually is potentially the value proposition. That is, this focus and attention to application and hands-on. It sort of depends on how you look at it as to whether it's a positive or a negative. And then branding. And this, I know I'm treading on dangerous ground here, but I thought, why not? So this statement, the degree is engineering technology, the career is engineering, as you all, I am assuming, know, is what I'm calling the brand, or at least publicly what is on the ETC website the public-facing side of your organization's website. So when I see this, I wonder what is motivating this messaging, and to whom is the messaging directed? Is it directed to the field, to the ASEE leadership, to prospective students, to the public at large? And what does this message say about the value proposition for engineering technology? Is it saying engineering technology is really just another word for engineering? So now I'm going to diverge a bit and speak a little bit about some other experiences that I've had, and this is really personal, so I mean, this is not the project or the committee, certainly. In fact, much of the last several slides have been more my view, certainly, than the committee's. But in getting to know a bit about the engineering technology community, I'm very much reminded of a group of K through 12 teachers called technology educators. These are the folks that used to be under the industrial arts mantle. In the mid-1980s, the American Industrial Arts Association, the membership organization representing industrial arts teachers, changed its name to the International Technology Education Association, ITEA. And a part of the rationale for the change was to try to move perceptions of the field away from the negative stereotype that shop class had become, and still is. The ITEA changed its name again about 4 years ago, adding the word engineering. So the new mouthful is ITEEA. It's the International Technology and Engineering Educators Association. And it's the field's latest attempt at repositioning, in this case to draw a closer connection to engineering, which is making its way increasingly into K through 12 education. Now, I don't want to make too much of this comparison, but to me, the similarities between the K through 12 technology education community and the four-year ET community are striking. Both have roots in engineering. I haven't told you that history, but it's true for technology ed. Both have a history of hands-on, application-oriented work or education, and both seem to be struggling for recognition and identity. And both are leaning toward engineering in that effort at redefinition. So that's where I will leave you. I hope I haven't offended anyone, but I would welcome questions or comments. I'd be happy to give as much detail as I can about the project or engage in a discussion about some of the more squishy non-project ideas I've presented today. But I did want to have a chance to hopefully stimulate your day and get you thinking, even if you don't agree with things that I've said. So thanks. I don't know what the format is. Am I? Okay. Okay, great. Okay.
I have a question. When you're talking about figuring out the differences or similarities of ET and engineering, looking at the curriculum is great, and also are you looking at the ABET or how they accredit these programs?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We've done the very simple thing, which is to do a side-by-side comparison of the A through K for both ET and engineering. And when you do that, they're, with maybe one exception, which I'm forgetting, and some minor wording differences, they're virtually the same, in my opinion. That doesn't get you very far, honestly, in my opinion, either. And the committee has not really talked about going further than that. I think I had a discussion with somebody on this very same topic by coincidence yesterday. And I think I don't know enough about ABET to know how you would get at that information, but my suspicion is it would be very difficult to, for example, get the reports from the visiting teams to understand how the evaluators, when they go into a program, view engineering technology versus engineering is probably, I think Walt is pretty involved in this, so I don't even know if it's the same people who would see an engineering program versus an engineering technology program. So it's a good question. I think just looking at the, the criteria is not very informative. And beyond that, the committee has not done anything. Sorry. The committee members, by the way, Jeff and Walt should feel free to jump in on any of these questions.
Actually, can you hear me? Okay, now I can see you hear me. Actually, there's different commissions. You know, there's the engineering EAC, Engineering Accreditation Commission, the ETAC, Engineering Technology Accreditation Commission, and typically there are different program evaluators in the two commissions. I mean, there's maybe a little overlap. Sometimes you see a evaluator that's been on both commissions, but mostly it's exclusive. But as far as going back to the branding, we like to consider engineering technology applied engineering. And in fact, that is the international name for engineering technology. So that's what we're pushing for. And I guess ABET doesn't have a problem with that, which I'm glad to hear. In fact, Mike Milligan might even want to say something on this issue.
Well, I guess what I would say about that particular issue on the applied engineering, absolutely. I mean, that's the prerogative of the program to name the program what they think is the best fit, in terms of what it describes the program and so forth. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with attracting students and making sure the students are well received in the marketplace. From an ABET point of view, we don't have an issue with that at all. We'd like to accredit applied engineering programs. And back to Walt's point about the criteria of the evaluators, when evaluators go on campus, they don't do any comparison between engineering and engineering technology. They just look at the criteria for the technology programs and accredit them against that standard. I mean, we're very rigorous about that, and for lots of good reasons. So I think looking at the criteria might provide some insight, probably more than you might think. But anyway.
Get back to ASOC here real quick.
Greg, in the context of ET programs, you mentioned several times K-12 arena, and especially right now with emphasis of next generation science standards and the emphasis of engineering the word E in STEM, you are also involved in a study looking at E at K-12 environment. And I'm wondering if you're finding any reason to connect the two studies and looking at E in a broader context of engineering workforce, including engineering and engineering technology in the K-12 STEM activities.
Thank you. That's a good question. The committee has talked a little bit about, and as I mentioned, the committee has 2 K-12 teachers on it, and they were brought on for that reason, actually, to sort of help or force the committee to at least think about connections into K-12. And I think we have not really figured out fully how to do that. One emerging concern, I think, on the part of the committee, at least in terms of conversations they've had, is that there's not good awareness in the K-12 education arena, particularly, for example, with career counselors about engineering technology. And even particularly opportunities for 2-year degrees in engineering technology. So I think possibly part of the effort of our project will be simply to raise this, raise the awareness of engineering technology as a career pathway so that it can be something that teachers and parents and career counselors are at least able to talk about, or at least can point to. But the larger issue of engineering in K through 12, This is a developing and kind of moving target in this country. The next generation science standards, which Ashok just mentioned, are recently published and have, for the first time, really made an effort to connect engineering, design, and some big ideas in engineering to science. And states and teachers and various other people who support teachers are struggling right now and will for many years to figure out how to do that. But that does provide an opportunity, I think, in some sense, for your community to do outreach that will have a more receptive audience, I think, at this point.
Do you want to make any comment about your current study on K-12 and engineering?
We are developing a website, this is what Ashok is referring to help those charged with implementing engineering in the K through 12 world. This is a Chevron-funded activity, and it's about a year into a 3-year run, and we we're doing a lot of audience research. We're trying to figure out what teachers and teacher educators think they need, what they're afraid of. So we've held several stakeholder meetings around the country. We held a third one in early November in California, in Pasadena. And we're doing a national survey. Some of you may actually find a link to it in your inbox. So yes, we do hope that our project, this website project, could draw attention to career opportunities, and that may be an opening too for a connection between ET and this other, and the K through 12 area. Thanks, that's a good point.
Let's see, can everybody hear me? I hate microphones. But, this is more of a comment than a question. I've given a lot of elevator speeches about engineering versus engineering technology. And one thing that it's very hard to do is differentiate a continuous spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at sort of the intellectual spectrum, beginning with conception and ending with operation, CDIO, which is the common term, engineering technology is more downstream. It's at the right hand of the spectrum. One of the differentiating features is we're more interested in working with industry to produce people that industry wants to hire, as opposed to reproducing themselves. People may disagree with me in this room about that, but I think that is one way to intellectually look at the disciplines, and that is something I have used to explain it both in industry and academia. And I find it's much easier to do it in industry than it is in academia.
I appreciate that, and I've heard that too, and it is helpful to think about that. I do want to mention something that you're also probably aware of, which is a challenge here, and that is that there's quite a bit of data evidence that the public at large, including parents and kids and employed working adults with 4-year degrees, don't know what engineering is, really, and they can't distinguish it often from science or technology. Views about engineering among K through 12 teachers often skew towards very simplistic notions, very similar to what young children think, such as engineers fix cars. Honestly, engine. I mean, the word engine is in the word. And there's data I can share with you if you want. So I guess I haven't said this, but I think maybe it would be helpful if this value proposition thing that I'm talking about, to me, is such a wonderful quality of engineering technology in its history on emphasis on application. And that's why I believe, personally, comparing yourself to engineering, I know you have reasons that you want to do that, is problematic. at least for most audiences that you're going to talk to, because most audiences don't understand much about engineering already. So you're not asking me, but if I were in your shoes, I would be thinking more about your uniqueness and how to promote that, and less about how to make yourselves seem similar or identical to engineering, which I know in your minds is true and a valid comparison, but in terms of the publics and the young people and their parents probably that you want to reach, it's not going to be it's going to be confusing at the least. So I understand this idea of a continuum, but that kind of discussion, you could not have that kind of discussion with people outside this room very productively, because they don't really understand what engineering is.
Well, I agree with that, and I also actually agree with what you said about emphasizing uniqueness.
Yeah.
And part of things also go back to what you say, you were saying about people don't understand what engineering is.
Yeah.
People want to go into construction management. That is not civil engineering, but they're directed that way from probably elementary school.
Well, I have a experience in engineering education, 3 schools of engineering, the British, the German, and the American School of Engineering. And the way I see it from the manufacturing standpoint, there is the design engineer who design cars, airplanes, whatever. Then the person who produced this, those are the applied engineers. And both of them are STEM-based engineers. The way how we look at superiority and inferiority is really something wrong. It is the old culture. To me, you need 1 designer and 5 people, the maker. If you look at the new philosophy from Society of Mechanical Engineering and SME, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, they have something called the maker, and we'll have it next year. It is another division of American Society of Engineering Education. My experience, I graduated with mechanical engineering, and I work in industry as engineering technologist, the engineer who make things. I was in charge of part of people and produce and all these things. So the slogan we had last year, the degree is engineering technology and the job is engineer. Let me put it right. The degree is engineering and the job is engineering technologist. That's the honest truth, without any bias, without, the PE, because the PE is controlling this, and I'm happy that some states allow the engineering technologists to sit in the FE exam. So that's the bigger picture. Actually, that is what is really needed. I mean, let me give you an example. If you go to Chattanooga and go to Volkswagen, you will never get to the design with the guys who are sitting in Germany. Our role is to produce cars. Same thing with the Japanese. Same thing with the Korean. So our graduate mechanical engineering, who they look at themselves are superior to my student in engineering technology, they end up there working, as engineering technologists. And sometimes my students come and they say, look at the mechanical engineers, they don't know what they're doing. So that's the bigger picture.
She doesn't want to ask her question. She's got a great question.
Could they turn the camera on? I found that I would like to do a college insurance. I want to name drop. Hello? Okay, my particular college, in my program, which is the EET program, I find that every time I have someone coming in to teach, they come in with a full master's in engineering and a full master's or a PhD, and they don't have any conception of how to teach technicians level work. They come in, and when I ask them to sit through a class first to get to know their audience and not just throw stuff out there, some of them actually refuse. And when we go over the material, they think that there's just too much work involved even to give at a technician's level to even pursue teaching in our specific area. That tends to lead to a more superior type, how we're going to look at them, and then that gives a different flavor to the students who hear or understand or know that as well. Students at a technician's level don't expect to have people come in and teach them over their heads or look out at an audience and just say, here's all the math, you'll get it when you get out there. They're actually in the field, and I think that's missed a lot when, people are looking at the academic side. So they're actually credentialing now to make sure that only PhDs and people with full engineers come in and teach at technical programs for ETs or EETs or METs. And again, they haven't had the experience, and they're not interested in that. They want the credentialing more than the actual experience for the student, and the student are at a level they may never get to a university, so they're not interested in pursuing a full engineering degree. So I don't think that that's looked at in a lot of aspects, and a lot of the audience is lost, and especially for women too that get into the program that are listening to that level of what they're anticipating or expecting, and no one can come down and bring it down to an understandable level for them to actually get it. The technicians and technologists, to us, that was an old term. Oh, sorry. That was an old term that is just revamping, it seems. It's not, it wasn't as, I'm a lot older than I look. But the technicians that are coming in through an EET program are hoping to go through a BSET program. So they're expected to be engineering technologists or engineering technician. They don't see the difference because they're treated the same. As long as there's a T on the end of it, there's engineers that'll look down their noses to them no matter what.
And I think, and I'm going to pass this back to Greg, kind of extending on that, that's not something we've really looked at in the study, is who's doing the teaching, the education, and of those degrees. So something we may want to think about.
I think we should differentiate very clearly the difference between technician and technologist. It's a huge, huge difference. During one of our meetings at the Engineering Technology Council, somebody said very nicely, we teach our students differently in terms of engineering and engineering technology programs. That's it. The level of education, the level of engineering knowledge is absolutely the same. I can give you many examples. We don't have too much time. I would like to raise one issue tonight during our last meal regarding changing name from engineering technology to applied engineering. It immediately would remove so many obstacles everywhere. We will be accredited by the same ETEC, Engineering Technology Accreditation Commission. Everything the same. What I can say, none of our graduates, none absolutely, have engineering technologist job. All jobs are engineering or engineering management. So, first of all, my suggestion, in your commission, there are two people who are very well qualified in terms of differentiation. It's Walt and Jeff. If you ask people from College of Engineering who never participated in engineering technology education, they do not know today difference between engineering and engineering technology. And this is, I would like again to say, this is applied or practical engineering, no technician level. It's completely different jobs.
Can I just make a quick response? I've heard that before, and it has some appeal. However, I think unless or until you have an effort will maybe not succeed, or if it does, it won't have the effect that you intend. I think part of the reality is that engineering education itself is always, has been, and currently is undergoing change itself, and actually is taking a turn more towards the practical and applied. Not universally, but there is a trend that the Academy of Engineering and others have been following. So if I were an engineer or wearing that hat, I would potentially, bristle at the suggestion that we're not applied. Of course we're applied. What do you mean we're not applied? So I totally get what you're saying. I think part of the challenge and opportunity also is for more communication, perhaps, between the leaders in engineering and leaders in engineering education and the leaders in engineering technology ed. I'm sure you all have tried that or are currently doing that, but it does strike me that there could be some benefit in having a more, open conversation between the two groups.
We've got time for one more question, and I get to go back to my seat.
I have a quick question, changing direction. You did a survey of engineering technologists in terms of their perspective on what their job was, and that was the chart you put up. Did you do
No,
something?
that's not a survey. Well, it is a survey, but it's not our survey. It's a regular federal survey of college graduates.
That probably answers my question. I was going to ask whether there was similar data for engineering.
There is similar data. Yes, similar exercise was conducted. You can pull out the engineer degreed people from this same data set. It's the National Survey of College Graduates. It's available online. You can, if you're patient enough and can figure it out, you could pull those numbers out.
All right, with that, it's time for a break, but I would like to give Greg a big round of applause for all of his work.